Hello, my name is John Richardson. Welcome to Richardson's Rubicon, Riffin the Rubicon, the talk show that we produce for the podcast. So thank you very much for joining me. And it's great to finally make it through another week. I'm getting quite pleased that I'm starting to do this on a weekly basis. I think once I get the regularity in there, then things will sort of get a bit better. So I hope you're all doing well. Today's show is going to be a little bit of a meander around the British fish scenario that has been in the news recently. And basically, Keir Starmer has done a deal with the EU. And there are a number of opinions about this deal, one of which is issued by Mr. Nigel Farage, who thinks it's a surrender deal to the EU, when really I don't think it is. I think it's actually a pretty good deal. But, over to yourselves. I'm just going to pop the link in chat. Oh, someone's in there already. Yeah, I'm just going to pop the link in chat for taking part as a live guest. So that's like calling in to a radio show, basically. So by all means, have a look at that and click on the link, and I'll look forward to welcoming you to the show, and then we can have a bit of a chat, which would be great, I think. So yeah, there we go. I've also got, let me just show it up on there. That's actually the link there. I've got it on the screen there. Oh my God, it's a mouthful. That's why you've got to join the chat to actually click on the link to join in. I'm in two minds, actually, as to whether to post it on social media as well. So I'm not sure what to do about that. Maybe you can possibly give me some advice. Maybe if I don't get anyone calling, I'll post it on social media. So I'll do that, yeah, I think. So anyway, this deal, let's have a look at what this deal actually is. So basically, there's an agreement. It's like a reset of relations between the UK and the EU following Brexit. And as you know, the Brexit deal that was organised by Johnson, or under his premiership, was, well, I don't think it was a particularly good deal. It was just to put the shutters up. Let's not agree to anything. Let's really damage trade. Now, as you know, I live in Scotland, so one of the things that we saw happen in Scotland was that the seafood production side of things, langoustines, oysters, all of that sort of thing, those elements they couldn't trade easily with the EU partners anymore. And that was a big problem. I mean, they had oysters that were rotting in lorries that couldn't make it across the border. So trade drastically reduced, and that shaved millions off the export market, and obviously downsized a number of operations, which was a bad thing. It was a really bad thing. So if you cast your mind back then, it was not a good deal. So the deal to reset relations has covered a range of areas. It's covered defence. It's covered fishing, which is the one that seems to grab the headlines all the time, which is strange because it doesn't have that much of an effect on the GDP. It's like 0.004% GDP, although it's politically a very volatile subject. The trade in food products and the ability of young people to move freely between the UK and the EU. So, we can go through this. Looking at the BBC website, which has mentioned quite a lot of this, but there's also some historic stuff that I've dug up as well around, some of the fishing rights and the quotas. So one thing you've got to bear in mind, I think, when we go into fishing a bit later, is that fishing quotas are seen as revenue generating assets. So even if someone doesn't have a working boat, what they can do is they can sell the quota, right? And what will happen then is they've made money out of that quota, and they kind of lease the quotas. That's what they do. They're a tradable item. And I don't want to go into too much detail because I don't want you to lose interest. But during the 80s and 90s, a lot of the English fishing fleets, if I'll just call it fleets, sold their quotas to foreign companies. So did Wales, to a lesser extent Northern Ireland, and to a much lesser extent Scotland. They kept hold of their fishing quotas. So when we fast forward to today, the fishing quotas that are more in the hands of UK nationals, if you like, are Scotland and Northern Ireland. Wales is practically owned by, majority owned by Spain. And you've also got in England, you've got a lot of other countries with an interest. So let's have a quick look at that. So the Dutch companies have got it. They hold about 25% of the English quota. Iceland also has a substantial portion of the English quota. And some really rich families also hold a major quota allowance. So you're not having these Captain Birdseye type people with their own sort of like self-employed fisherman scenarios going on. There's big business involved in fishing, and there are big families involved in fishing as well. So the whole thing about fishing is kind of like overblown considering the size of its contribution to the GDP. But there are issues there, and I'll go through them in a slight minute. So food, let's go back to food. So the food deal is good, right? The food deal means that there are going to be less checks on UK food exporters to the EU, right? And that's all about hygiene, really. So, and the reason for the checks was because we weren't going to follow the EU rules on hygiene. And because of that, naturally, the trading partner of the EU would like to check all of these incoming goods. I mean, it's as simple as that. If you say that you're not going to follow the rules and you want to send items across, then they're going to want to check stuff, aren't they? I don't see any way around that. That's what they're going to do. But once you agree that you're going to follow the rules, right, then there are less checks, and it kind of like naturally follows, right? So both sides have agreed now to work on a joint food safety agreement. It's not in place. It has to be redrawn. And the reason it has to be redrawn is because we're not a member of the EU. So we've got to redraw it as a trading partner. So food and drink exports to the EU were worth 14 billion. So around about 14 billion current times, yeah? That's what it's worth. But that in itself is 34% down compared to 2019. So there's a lot to be gained, roughly around about 7 billion to be gained by simply agreeing standards for food transport and whatnot, and food production. So that's really quite good. The only losers on this would be the people that don't want the UK to follow EU rules, as there are strings attached. Do you want to know what the strings are? I bet you do. I'm just going to join show, call in here. I don't know what the weather's like where you are, but it's been 15 degrees C, bit windy, but it's all coming to an end now. It's all going to rain now. Not very happy about that, but there we go. There we go. So this is probably what's got the Leavers riled, the Brexiters. So there's going to be a future EU food standard system, and we're going to have to follow it going through something that's called a dynamic alignment. And as a country, we've got to accept that the European Court of Justice will have the final say in any disputes in this area. So I can see them all waving the flags now, saying that's not right, that's not right. But I'm afraid that's the world we live in now, and that's unfortunately what we've got to do. Those are the conditions. And we've also got to make a financial contribution. And I don't know how much that is. No one seems to know how much that is. So it's got to be worthwhile, though. So it can't be anything that makes it, a poor deal. Then, of course, we're going on to the fishing.
Key is we've got our fish back. They're now British fish, and they're better and happier fish for it.
That was Rees-Mogg. Now then, there's no such thing as British fish, really, right? And we didn't ever get the fish back. Essentially, what happened was, though, the deal was to get 25%, an increase of 25% of the UK quota, which happened. So that undeniably happened. And that was part of the Brexit consequence, if you like. And the current deal that's been negotiated by Boris Johnson's government is what that is. And that's extended now to 2038. So let me just get this fact right. So under the existing agreement, which is due to expire in 2026, EU vessels get access to UK waters to fish in return for transferring 25% of their fishing quota, the amount they are allowed to catch, to UK fleets. That's now been extended to 30th of June 2038. So it's not too bad on the face of it, but some groups have actually said this is bad, right? The Scottish Fishermen's Federation says it's a horror show. They're quoted as saying it's, not a great deal. It means that the bargaining power has been taken away from future talks, and they would have preferred annual negotiations. So making it last until 2038 has taken away that annual negotiation thing. I can see the point in that. I can see that being pretty rough, actually. But on the flip side, what it also means, it means that the export of seafood to the EU has been streamlined. So the agreement to reduce checks would speed up the delivery of things like salmon, premium salmon, langoustines, oysters, all of those sorts of things. All of these things would be streamlined and heading over to the EU, which frankly is where the main market is for these products. So that can only be a good thing, I think. So, like with any trade, there's always a trade-off. You've got to balance the good with the bad. And unfortunately, that's just the way of the world, I think.
You can now call into the show. Use the link in the show chat. You'll be queued and have a private room with John and the other guests. And before you know it, you'll be live on the show. Make sure your optional camera and necessary microphone are ready. Use headphones if you have them. Be clothed. We'll see you soon. Click that link now.
Hello, back again. Just a quick short break. So the gist of it is there are a reduction in the amount of checks as long as we maintain a particular standard. The arbiter of the standard is the European Court of Justice, and basically the rest of the deal is kind of like as is in terms of fishing, except it lasts for a long, long time, 2038. So the next part of the deal is the youth mobility. Personally, I wish we had freedom of movement for people of my age too, but we've got youth mobility, and that will help with things like education, musicians, all sorts of stuff like that. So young people in the UK and EU would be able to work and study more freely between the two places. Now, it's got to be confirmed yet. It was just like all these things, it's kind of like just an announcement. They've got to really sort of iron out the details on these things. So the winners would be the young people, because they'd be able to do what comes naturally to young people, and that's travel around different countries and stuff. Maybe it would even help resolve some of the crisis in the UK farms, which is where we haven't got people picking fruit and digging up vegetables. So it may actually help on that side of things as well. I think it personally will. The people who lose out on this, though, are the ones which would say the net migration will affect the immigration figures. But that really is probably going to only be temporary. And once you get a handle on how that's being done, then it should be easily controlled. I mean, I would imagine it would be easily controlled. So that's pretty good. And the other thing that they've brought in as well is the e-gates. So you'll be able to use e-gates at EU airports, which is very good as well. But we don't know the details of that. But we do know that it will help reduce the queuing that takes place. I mean, my daughter went to Poland for the Auschwitz experience, and I mean, the queue they had at the airport to get in was just horrendous, and the other queues to get back in our country were the queues to get into Poland was horrendous. And she also had a queue at security as well in Poland that was horrendous as well, and they nearly missed the flight. So that was a bit of a panic job. So hopefully this e-gate thing will actually help a great deal. I have had some people comment to me about this and send some comments in. Now then, I don't know whether I was stirring things up or not, but I did sort of, make a comment saying, I don't know why Brexiters are complaining. We're still out of the EU, which is true. And we've negotiated a deal between our own sovereign, because that's what they like, sovereign elected government, and the EU that will benefit both parties and repair much of the damage caused by the no deal that the Tories made. And making deals is what they wanted, right? I'm sure it was. I mean, this is where we were before this, by the way. Listen.
In December, I'll be in Beijing, opening up new pork markets.
That was Liz Truss there, announcing the opening up of pork markets in Beijing. That's where we were, remember. We have got a huge trading bloc right on our doorstep. That's what we've got. Distracting us with silliness like pork markets in Beijing was ridiculous. And has anyone ever heard of the result of the pork markets in Beijing since? No, right? Because it was a non-starter. It was a waste of time. Absolute waste of time. In fact, that didn't last in the headlines longer than a bloody lettuce. So there we go. Yeah, the comments were, I don't think that our fishermen will agree with you. And I said, funny you should say that. Fishermen in my area are pretty chill about it, as they fish langoustines, lobsters, oysters, and the lockfine business will now have a chance of recovery, which is great. Someone else has said the farmers will suffer. No, the farmers won't suffer. How will the farmers suffer? Honestly, there's a whole load of nonsense about this. Right. So basically, what's happened here is this is where we go. I'm not going to argue with stupid Brexit people, and I am going to call them stupid, right? So basically, I was saying they might get more workers with the freedom of movement. So as we can't have Brits picking fruit and veg, can we? That didn't go so well. This lady has responded, we would have Brits picking fruit and veg if we stopped paying them benefits for being lazy. That's the type of intelligence that is driving some of the arguments against any form of improvement to people in Britain. Yeah, it's the hate, it's the dislike, it's the otherism, right? Obviously, this lady is very hurt. I'm just going to say that. But what they shouldn't do is just tar everyone with the same brush, right? And say that, stop paying benefits to people. She is obviously very lucky and has a role in a job somewhere or has means to survive. A lot of people don't, and no people wouldn't want to go working on a bloody fruit farm because the pay is absolutely shite and the conditions are horrible. And let's put that into perspective as well. So, but some people would, and it was usually seen as the reserve of the young people who were doing it for a break to get away for a certain period of time, not as a full-time career, honestly. Also, another person basically said to me, we are not Brexiters, we are true democratic Britons, Britain spelt with AI, unlike you. I mean, where do you start with that? Where do you start with it? You just can't. Here we go.
We have never had it so good.
Remember that? It's all a bit rubbish, isn't it, really? But now with this deal, I think things will improve. Things will get a lot better. And the best part of this deal, I think, is the defence side of things. So the winner would be the UK defence firms that may get contracts from the new EU rearmament fund. And let's face it, war is on the horizon. Yeah, it's literally, it's on the continent. We're only separated by a thin strip of water, but in global terms, we're already at war, really. I would imagine, I'm not going to say it for certain, but we are affected by cyber warfare from the likes of Russia, North Korea, and China. That happens all the time. All the time. Things escalate, though. And, I think we're at the escalation stage of that. But there is a Security Action for Europe fund, which is called SAFE. I mean, I would imagine they shoehorned all the words in to make it spell safe as an acronym. There's 150 billion available to enable member states to rearm. And it was going to be spent on EU-based defence funds. So UK defence funds may get the contracts for that. EU defence firms might be the losers on this because they might have hoped to get more of the revenue. But anyway, that was what it says on the BBC website. And I just thought I'd go through that. I did write to the Scottish Fishermen's Federation for their views on this and received zero response. And I also wrote to the Scottish Seafood Association for their comments on this, and again received zero response. But what I will do is let you know, I'll update you if there is anything to do that, anything from them. I just want to quickly find this little chart. So this is a summary table I've put together. So when it comes to EU access to UK waters, pre-Brexit, the EU had full access under the common fisheries. Post-Brexit, it was reduced by 25% over 5 years, right? And the May 2025 deal is going to be extended access until 2038, but by that reduction of 25%. The UK quota ownership pre-Brexit was a mix of domestic and foreign, and that's not changed with this deal. That's a tradable asset. So people need to trade that asset. For example, the English who basically sold their quotas to foreign firms when the times were tough, unlike the Scottish who held on to their quotas, the English need to buy them back. That's what needs to happen. The economic link rules, so pre-Brexit, there had to be 50% of UK landings or crew in the fishing fleet. Post-Brexit, that increased to 70% of UK landings. That means that even if it was a foreign-owned fishing firm with foreign-owned trawlers, they would have to land 70% of their fish landings in the UK, and for processing, you see, and have 70% crew. Now, in practice, what happens is they land the fish here to maintain the 70% figure, but what they then do, they basically transport it straight over to the EU. That should or may change, because in the May 2025 deal, there are no changes there. And small-scale fishers, they had limited quota access in pre-Brexit. Post-Brexit, there were slight improvements, and in the May deal, there's no changes. So the slight improvements are still there. So there's nothing really that's got worse, although the EU have got access to UK waters until 2038, but by a reduction of 25% on what it was before, which extends the Boris Johnson deal. So there's nothing there. Anyway, that's it. I'm going to wrap up now. There has been no chat, I'm sorry to say. And I know I've got a few people on, but I'm going to go. That was kind of like the deal. Although I'll give you one more chance to sort of join in. One more chance. Let's see. Any takers? Tick, tock, tick, tock. You joining in? No? Okay. Right then. So I will go. Thank you very much for your time, and I'll convert this into a podcast and I'll release it in the next couple of days or so. It'll be up your internet tubes sooner than you can wave a fishy tail. Bye.
Riffing the Rubicon. The talk show at the end of its tether. This podcast was brought to you by a simple man. The website is at richardsonsrubicon.com, where you will find all social links apart from X. You'll also find the details of the next live show, which is usually on a Thursday at 9 p.m. UK time. There are many ways to take part on the show, from simply listening or watching, reading the show notes, leaving a voice note, emailing the show at john@richardsonsrubicon.com, arranging a fireside chat at a time of your choosing, becoming a guest, or calling in to the talk show during recording. You have no excuses, and we have absolutely no plan. Join in now. richardsonsrubicon.com